So when you have an Mzungu here visiting in Tanzania, we usually get things done on time. We're clock oriented.
Thanks. For example, we have the phones. Hello guys, on this YouTube channel, my name is Michael Felici and I'm here today. I'm at Jim's place, Jim Simmons' place, right?
Yep.
And so I'm here, I'm ready to ask him some questions concerning about this kind of aspect, the business aspect in Tanzania and his experience with it. And so I'm giving him time to introduce himself. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I want to thank you very much for inviting me to just chat with you a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
I am a theologian and a Bible teacher at Nassa Theological College. So a lot of times people might think, why am I talking business? But before we moved to Tanzania, we've been here for 1 year now. We came the week before Christmas last year. And so we moved from the U.S. After being 54 years old in business before coming here. So this has been an interesting thing for me because, when you do your job, doctor or lawyer or business person, farmer, you also have life outside of work. And my life, for the last 25, 30 years outside of work has been in the area of missions, what's called missions for Christianity. And so we've traveled around and visited people in different places.
Oh yeah, that's good.
So for the last 25 years, we've been visiting places like Tanzania, and I came here for the first time personally in 2015. Yeah. But my wife, Susan, you've met her as well. She moved to Tanzania in 1994, and she lived here for 2 years in Arusha. She's an accountant, and she was doing accounting at a school there, at a university there. So we've known about Tanzania for a long time, but I came here in 2015.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So when I visited in 2015, mostly I was visiting the school here, Nassa Theological College. That's where I teach now. Or we were visiting different ministries like TCRC down in Mwanza or other places. But everywhere I travel, even though I'm there for the outside of work thing in missions, I also love to just find out, hey, how's business going, And so we were looking at fish farming here, and maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were looking at other people who do a lot of farming. A lot of agriculture happens, here in Tanzania. That's one of the things I've observed. And so when we came when I came in 2015, I actually started thinking, I'm actually enjoying communicating truth more than I'm enjoying doing business. I know that might sound strange, but at that point I went back to college. I got my master's degree in Bible and theology and missions. And so that's what brought us to Tanzania. Now, when I came to Tanzania, this is the part that got fun for me. We came first to learn a little bit of Swahili. So, mke wangu na mimi tulijifunza Kiswahili pale Morogoro.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So from July of last year to December, we began to learn. I still only have a few words, but we're trying, right? Najaribu. So while we were in Morogoro, though, this is when I started to see or understand the business culture here now. And since 1990s, when my wife was here until now, Tanzania, man, it has progressed significantly.
Oh wow.
Yeah, for sure. So, if you can imagine back in the 1990s, you probably weren't even born yet. But at that point, the culture and the economy then, if you could take a picture of it in the 90s, and then you could take a picture of it last year in Morogoro, completely different. So we met many people in different businesses, and I got to talk to Bajaj drivers. I got to talk to people who have their own dukas. I was speaking with people who were always talking with me about business. So even though theology is sort of my space, I still love business, man. So I love talking business with whoever I can. Anyway, thanks for letting me come and chat, and I hope it's valuable for both of us.
Okay, you're welcome. So yeah. And so thank you, Jim, for giving a little bit introduction about yourself. We have the first question of the talk today, and the first question is, what do you understand concerning with the issue of time management?
Yeah. So my master's degree was actually in cross-cultural ministry, and this is an issue that everybody in the world talks about. Some cultures, they value relationship and events. I think that's for sure the way it is here in Tanzania. Other cultures, they value getting things done on time. That's for sure the history of the U.S. And so I think there's different cultures that give different answers to this. So when you have an Mzungu here visiting in Tanzania, we usually get things done on time. We're clock oriented, right? And this actually helps to help us focus our priorities. It helps us to focus our productivity. But in that, if you go too far, you start losing relationship. We start treating each other like tools to get things done with. And we stop treating each other like humans if we go too far with that. But on the other side, when we come here to Tanzania and we see that people are very relationship-oriented, event-oriented, who cares when it actually starts? Everybody's coming together, we're having fun, we're connecting. And if you go too far with that, then you don't accomplish the things that you really wish you could have. We can sometimes lose. Our dreams can go away from us by the fact that we're not actually taking priorities and making things more important than others. So I think in some ways that to begin with this question, how do you do time management? A lot of it has to do with what are your cultural priorities. And I hope there's a balance, honestly, because if we go too far with the way we do it in the West, time only, then we start losing, you'll see this in the US actually, you start losing the value of your humanity. And now the only thing you're valuable for is what you can do. And you've lost humanity. Here, the other side would be in order to allow ourselves this freedom to relate with someone however we want and whenever we want, then we've lost the ability to have productivity sometimes. So maybe we can mix them together, right, and come up with some form where the culture and the events and the people of Tanzania can meet with more organized or maybe more productivity, priority-oriented focus. But that's a challenge, man. That's all over the world, and it's been all over the world since the beginning of time. Do I love people more and I spend my time with people? Do I want to be productive? And the answer is yes to both of those, but they compete in the same space. That's a good starting thought.
So let's go back to the second question. And this question is all about, as we know, there are different things that most of the people tend to do. But unfortunately, such things tend to act as time thieves. And those kind of time thieves are poor planning and interruptions, idle chats and telephone talks, and unnecessary meetings. Now, how do you always escape from such time thieves?
That's a tough question for everybody. I don't always escape these things. I wish I did. Very few people actually conquer this one very well. But we strive. We try to get better at these things. Early on in my life, I was really into sports a lot. Like we saw the World Cup here recently, right? And Brazil wins barely at the end, and everyone on that field is focused. They weren't thinking about, I wonder what's on TV right now. They weren't thinking that. They weren't even thinking, I wish I could go out for a pizza right now. They were not thinking anything like that. They had one thing in mind, right? And so I found over time, I had this competing ideas going on inside of me. Right now I want some pizza. Right now I want to go watch a movie. Right now I want to stay up and maybe play some video games or something like that. And all of those things, it turns out they're not robbing me. This is important, man. It took me a long time to catch this. I'm robbing myself. I'm going for the things I really want in this minute rather than the things I really want for the big picture, if that makes sense to you. And so one of the things I think, if you look all over the world right now, there's conflict between, right now, Russia and Ukraine, right? But there's conflict between France and Brazil on the soccer field, right? There's all of these conflicts around the world. And when we look at it, how can you look empirically, right? This is the word where you touch something, you can see something in the physical world. If we measure empirically around the whole world, every culture has conflict. Every family has conflict. Well, what's going on is, inside of all of humanity, we all have conflict, even within our own selves. I want more things than I can do. So one of the biggest things I found that's helpful in this area of time thieves, I like how you use that word, time thieves, thieves that steal from you what you really wanted. It turns out, honestly, my impression is, it turns out the greatest thief of what you really want is your own self. This is something that's important for people to capture. Once you have an idea, I'm clear about what I want, Messi has no time thieves. He just says, no, I'm not touching that. I'm going for the goal. That when you have more clarity on what your purpose is, when you have more clarity on the things that mean something to you, what's the most meaningful thing to you? All of a sudden, those things that used to be your time thieves, you kick them out. You don't want them there. And so you can certainly do some practical things like managing your time, taking some time away, and just writing down, what do I think I really want? Spend some time thinking about that. I want these 7 things, but if I had to pick only one, I would pick this one. Taking time to do that is a good idea, but you should remember, though, from my perspective, the greatest war is the war between what I want and what I want. And getting clear on that will help. For me, it's been a game changer for my life. When I finally caught that, I heard that when I was young. But you can hear something and it doesn't actually grab you. You don't change. So the question is, can you be transformed from one way where I do whatever I want whenever I want to another way where I've gotten clarity? Here's what I really want, and these other things are not going to get in my way. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's kind of my thought on that.
That's good. Okay, so I will ask you, what do you think is the advantage and disadvantage of globalization?
That's a good question. Man, that's a big question. You can go in so many directions. I do come from the Christian perspective, right? And so when we look at the Old Testament, how do we get all of these cultures in the first place? Humanity was in one place, the Tower of Babel. You can read about this in Genesis. And God divides the nations. Now we're living in a world that's divided. It's been that way forever. And now globalization seems to be bringing all of these cultures back together. Okay? And at the same time, within the Christian perspective, we know that Jesus has already come to the earth. And in his death and resurrection, he has made us united. So we have 2 competing ideas going on in the world right now. In the one side, we're coming together because we decide from our own wisdom how to produce unity. And the other side is we have God bringing his people together in the church globally. Right now there are people who are Christians who are Sukuma. There are people who are Korean. There are people from all over the world. There's 2 ways globalization is happening. Cultures are coming together in Christ, or cultures are coming together in the world. And you have both of these things happening all the time within Christianity, right? Or within the world. So now globalization, if we take it away from the Christian perspective only, but to the whole world, globalization is some form of bringing the entire world together. And what are we doing with that? Pornography, video games, TikTok. These are the things we're doing with our globalization on one side. But on the other side, I was just in an event recently in Turkey, Uturuki.
Yeah.
Very near Istanbul, where there were 500 people who are in education from around the world who came together. Now, for the last year leading up to this meeting on accredited schools, for the last year, we've been meeting on Zoom around the world. 500 people every couple of months having our discussions leading up to the trip that we took to Turkey. Now, so globalization is also bringing people together to do really good work. So when your question is, are there advantages and disadvantages? For sure. We lose so much of our lives today on things that are connected around the world. And we gain so much more productivity with things that are from around the world. And so I guess my thought would be to say, back to the very first question we talked about, there is conflict within my own self. How many things do I really want? What are the things that I have to have this minute? And then we follow after our desires as quickly as we want something, as quickly as we want anything. We just solve that. And with a push of a button on our phones these days, I can watch my TikTok thing. And you start, let me see some football plays. Let me see Messi. And then it pops up some ad and oh man, let me see this thing. There's a girl, let me look at that thing. Oh, here's somebody playing with a little doggy or a kitten. Let me kick that. And you find yourself an hour later clicking on all these things that are distractions And during that hour, you've lost the usefulness. And I would say globalization is both good and bad, right? It's bringing people together, but how are you engaging? That's the question. And I'm having to ask myself that same question. How am I engaging in the technologies? How am I engaging in these cross-cultural connections? Am I using them to do whatever I want this second and I'm losing my life? Or am I using it as a way to build with 500 people around the world? The question of global theological education. And then we're meeting in Turkey and having really significant meetings with these people at the end of using the same globalized technology. So it can be good or bad, I think. And it's back to that conflict inside.
That's good. Okay, so the other question is, I have this, I see most of us, we youth and teenagers, we are not in a such high point of level or lifestyle, but we have this problem. We look too much forward, try to go deep in trying to get expensive stuffs, like expensive phones, while we can take a picture of some successful people in the US or anywhere else, or among us here in Africa. They don't go too much forward for them expensive things. For example, we have the phones that you can find a person who is successful, maybe let's say an American guy, right? He's successful, but he's not too much going for the iPhone 14. He's using maybe the latest, the earliest version of the iPhone 8. And so, what do you think is the problem here? In most of the Africans?
That's a really good question,
people.
Michael. I mean, it's actually, I would want to make a slight correction for you from what your perception. You know, we think about America from what you see in your on television or the people you've met, and maybe from the U.S. We think about Africa or Tanzania with just limited information. But if you could get to know America, you would find out this same problem is in America too.
Oh.
Yeah. So you know Matt, and so Matt's a successful businessman in the U.S. who comes over here and does things, and he has the iPhone 8. He doesn't have the newest thing. But there are other people in the city where my sister lives right now. They have homes that are way more expensive than they can afford. And then they live in 2 rooms in the home. They really have an empty house, but they live in the neighborhood that everybody says, oh, they must be doing really well. Now they're starting a business and they want the world to think I'm a big business person because look at this neighborhood I live in. But if you actually went to their home, you would find they only live in 2 or 3 rooms, and there are 15 rooms in the home, but they can't afford to fill the rooms. So this idea of looking like I'm caught up with the world causes people to live lives that are empty. Even in the U.S., happens all the time. It happened for me too. When I was young, it's a funny story. It's kind of a sad story and funny at the same time. When I was young, my first job that I had, I was in sales. Now, I looked around and I could see these very successful men in our industry. They had this very special pin in their shirt, you know, a shirt pocket, and you have a special pin. And when it came time to have somebody sign the contract, they would bring out this pin. It was called a Mont Blanc pin. Really nice pin. $100, $100 US. Back in the 90s. And I thought, if I'm going to be a successful businessman, I better buy a Mont Blanc pin. Now, I couldn't even afford to go and buy my own pizza, but I found somewhere $100 so I could have the pin so I could look successful. Now I'm successful, you see? The reason you know I'm successful is look at my pin.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And really, if you look at my life, I can't buy a pizza. Now I can't buy 10 pizzas because I bought a pin. I was an idiot. Okay, this is called stupid or foolish, right? But we do this all the time. So, and with phones or anything else. And there's this back to the same conversation we're having. There's a competition within me. How can I feel like I'm doing well in life? Well, I have to keep up with those things the culture tells me I have to be doing well with. That's one. I'm keeping up with an image. Or I want to do whatever I feel like doing, and somehow these guys with TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, they know how to put something in front of you that grabs your attention, right? And so they've got the algorithms that know you, and they put different things in front of different people. And somewhere my life is being led by the world outside, and inside I don't have the ability to keep up. Now, what happened for me when I realized this is going on in everybody around the planet, I'm either producing an image or trying to chase an image. I'm not really that guy. I don't really have the ability to own this 15-room house. But I'm producing the image like I'm that guy, so you can do business with me. Do you see what I'm saying? And now we have a world filled with people who are producing an image because we know we're really not that guy on the inside. And so for you, as an example, I would want to throw one example out. There's a guy named Eric Jenkins. He has 8 oak acres. He's a really good photographer. He has these really, really old cameras. And he takes some amazing pictures with these old cameras. And other people who are doing what you're doing, they're like, I got to have the latest, newest, amazing camera. And they're not capable with the new equipment of producing anything like what Eric can produce. And the difference is he has inside the knowledge and the skill. He studied the light. He studied aperture. He studied aspect. He knows those things, and he can use an old camera and produce better photography than most people today who buy these very expensive new cameras with the great GoPro balancers on them and all of that sort of stuff. And I guess my point is, in every aspect of life, the question is, will you be built up inside first and to then go produce in the world from a solid inside? This is the idea again of the transformation of Christ. If we can let Christ come in and destroy the emptiness and brokenness within and replace it with the goodness that the Creator, who created all of the creation we have. Like, look at all the animals here in the Serengeti. We're 40 minutes from the Serengeti. We see the amazingness of creation in the Serengeti. We see it in the universe. We see it in the oceans. That same God is asking for a relationship with us, and he's saying, if I can come in and replace what you have had with what you really want. Now all of a sudden we have people who are producing, like our friend Matt we're talking about. How many things does he touch? And everything he touches, it seems like it improves. He doesn't need the iPhone to say, I'm amazing. He's amazing. He doesn't need the phone to say that. How did he become amazing? He began to know God, and God transformed that battle inside from wasting my life on stupid things like that Mont Blanc pen and becoming someone who actually understood how to communicate with people real value and real truth. That's kind of my thinking.
Young man. That might have been we have a lot of young men, especially in Africa. Let's take the aspect in Africa, right? So what do you think is the problem with the young man, that they are running to marriage and that yet they're not yet prepared?
Yeah, it's probably similar to the last answer. I need the pin, and then you'll think I'm successful. I need the wife, and now I've become a man. And there's a point here where if you instead of saying, how can I get that thing out there or that person out there who will make me amazing, what if I say, okay, how can I become the kind of man that an amazing woman would marry? This is a very different question. Not how can I get the woman who will prove to you and the world that I'm amazing, but how can I become the kind of man that this woman needs in a husband? And when a woman sees this man is solid, the right woman will come to you. And we just get everything backwards. We chase the thing we want when we don't have the capacity to have it, rather than chasing becoming the kind of person that can actually sustain having those things. It's in every area of life. Just we're getting things backwards. We're wanting the final result. We don't want to actually become the kind of person that creates those results. In every area. We talked about it with photography, with selling, with even with marriage. And the good part on this marriage thing is God is not finished with us wherever we are. If you catch yourself having gotten into a marriage before you really were ready, you can change. You can change within that marriage. Just stop trying to chase the world's images and start focusing on becoming that guy you've been created for. And as you get more focused on that, Messi doesn't have the questions again. What am I having for dinner? Messi is saying, how do I get this ball and that goal and win the World Cup? And we'll find out people who are actually becoming who they've been designed to become by God.